We hear it everywhere that immigrants, and generally people are talking about immigrants from Central and South America, that they are causing the economic recession, that they are stealing jobs, increasing crime, and not paying taxes. We are told that we need to close our borders to protect our economy and our security. But is this actually true? Let's look at these narratives for what they really are: myths. But first, let's make sure we're on the same page. What is the current immigration policy for the United States? And we're going to focus on the border with Mexico and the United States. Well, it's closed. We have closed borders. It's really hard to get legal status to enter the US and live here. It's really time-consuming and expensive, and it's definitely not accessible for everyone. In fact, it's not accessible for most people. It means deportations. It means border fences. Closed borders means having two governmental agencies: ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and Border Patrol, which are both exclusively devoted to finding and deporting undocumented immigrants. Border Patrol is focused mainly on the border, while ICE is for the interior of the United States. The annual number of deportations is 400,000 people. This number has actually had a record high under President Obama. In his first 3 years of presidency, we've had 1.2 million people deported. This is a picture of the border between Mexico and the United States. Does anyone want to guess how much it cost to build this fence? It costs $16 to $21 million per mile for this fence. Just to give you an idea, there are 1,926 miles of border between Mexico and the United States. Why is the United States spending this much money and effort in maintaining closed borders when we're cutting funding to education and social programs? Well, it's because most Americans believe these misconceptions and myths that justify closed borders. So I'm going to examine 5 of these major myths. The first myth is that immigrants steal our jobs. Well, this isn't true. Immigrants create jobs. And how do we know this is true? That immigrants actually create jobs? Well, we can look back into our history when women were starting to enter the workforce. People were terrified that women were going to steal jobs from men. There's this major pushback for women to stay in the house and not to have an outside job. But we now know that this is a ridiculous idea. In most households, both partners work outside of the home. In fact, most households need 2 incomes. So, how did this happen? Well, women spent their earnings, which created a higher demand for goods and services, and they innovated. They came up with new jobs and businesses that were needed. The same is true for immigrants. Jobs are not a zero-sum game. The second myth is that immigrants don't pay taxes. Well, actually, all immigrants pay taxes. All immigrants pay property and sales taxes. And all legal immigrants, and most undocumented immigrants, pay income taxes as well. Now that seems really counterintuitive. Undocumented workers paying income taxes? But it's actually been found that the Social Security Administration, they keep this suspense file that keeps track of all the money that comes in that's not actually connected to any real Social Security number. It's been shown, based on estimations of the population of undocumented immigrants in the United States, that 3/4 of undocumented immigrants pay income taxes. The third myth is that immigrants increase crime. Well, actually, it was shown through research by Professor Tim Wadsworth, who is currently at the University of Colorado at Boulder. It was shown through his research that immigrants are less likely to commit crime than native-born citizens. And this was shown because cities that have the highest populations of immigrants are also the safest cities in the United States. The fourth myth is that we need to secure our borders to protect ourselves from terrorism. Now, this is a really important one for me. I know this is an important one for many Americans, especially in light of the September 2001 attacks. So I made sure when I visited a Border Patrol station to ask the agents how many terrorists they apprehend annually. Well, they didn't actually have a number for that. I asked them how would they identify a terrorist when they're apprehending immigrants. They also didn't have an answer for me. This is also backed up by statistics, not just my personal experience. It was found that the Department of Homeland Security only charged 12 out of 814,073 people in a course of 3 years with terrorism charges. So that means that that's 0.0015%. Of those 12 charges, 6 of the charges were dropped. So that means that less than 0.0015% of immigrants in immigration courts over a 3-year period were charged with terrorism. See, that doesn't add up for me when we think about how major this myth is, how it's in everything that we hear about immigration, and in how much we're spending on immigration versus other things like education. The fifth myth is that if we secure our borders, immigration will stop. This is not true. Stronger border enforcement does not deter immigration. People will do anything to provide for their families. They will ride on top of trains for thousands of miles, risking their life. They will cross the desert in the scorching sun, knowing that they may never reach the border. Why do they do this? Because people will do anything for their families. Stronger border enforcement, does not deter this. Even if the U.S. deployed the army to the border, if we had 100-foot walls, if we checked identification papers of every single person in the United States, immigration would continue. In fact, stronger border enforcement just increases the deaths and suffering of people. This is artwork on the border wall on Mexico's side. If you notice, there are really small pictures that form a bigger picture. Every single picture is a person that has died while trying to cross the border. When looking at immigration, we have to look at the bigger picture. A bigger wall is not going to deter immigration. So what will? What are the root causes of immigration? Why do people even have to migrate in order to support their families? Why would people migrate if they had any other option? Do they have any other option? So I've talked a lot now about immigration myths and things that are going on, and I've asked you some pretty big questions. And you probably have a question of your own right now, of what can you do? Well, you can start conversations. You can start thinking critically when you hear about immigration in the news or from people around you. You can also learn more. This is just the very tip of a huge iceberg. You can read. These are all fantastic books. They're in fiction and nonfiction about the border. You can also search the web. And if you're really interested, you could have your own border experience. Borderlinks is a great organization located in Tucson, Arizona, and they have 2-week immersion trips where you can get a group of people together. They usually have churches or student groups or any sort of group, and you learn about the U.S. and Mexico relations. I'd like to just thank Dave Underwood and Allie and Earlham College Border Studies and the Invest Community Leadership Program and everyone who's been watching this video.